2016. I mean, where do you even begin? It's a year that is so bad, it's actually become an adjective. That's so 2016. How 2016 is that? Let's just go through how appalling this year's been, but I do want to end this on a hopeful note. Now, that is difficult because I did do a video at the beginning of this year, which has not aged well. And what that video does is set out my hopes for 2016, including Britain hopefully not leaving the European Union, Donald Trump being defeated, and so on and so forth. It wasn't a prediction, to be fair. It was just, I'd like this to happen, and it didn't.
This political stuff is nasty and it's tough.
2016's been this kind of grim reaper, taking away much-loved celebrities. David Bowie, Alan Rickman, Terry Wogan, Prince, Caroline Aherne, Victoria Wood, Leonard Cohen, Muhammad Ali, Gene Wilder, Pete Burns, Andrew Sachs. You could go on and on. No, it was a case of 2016 strikes again, not another one. Much-loved artists, comedians, musicians, entertainers, people who brought happiness and joy into the world. It was a year of horror when it came to terrorism, whether it be the bombings in Brussels in March, whether it be the dozens of LGBT people who were murdered in Orlando, whether it be the horrendous Bastille Day attacks in Nice in France, constant bombings in Iraq, which have become so familiar they're almost like background noise, in Saudi Arabia, and tragically in countless other places all over the world. Thousands of people lost their lives at the hands of terrorism.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
It was a year when the misery of the war in Syria continued and escalated, with Aleppo being besieged, bombed by the Russians, and then overrun by Assad and his proxy militia. Whether it be the brutal Saudi-led bombing of Yemen, which has killed thousands of people, all with the support and the arms, the weapons provided by our own country here in Britain. Whether it be the abortive military coup in Turkey, in which so many people died, but which a regime which is increasingly becoming a dictatorship used as a pretext to crush all opposition, mass sackings, mass arrests, mass imprisonment, further curtailing of basic democratic rights, freedoms and civil liberties. In Brazil, the progressive president, Dilma Rousseff, was overthrown in what was a soft coup to be replaced by a right-wing government of privileged white oligarchs, completely unrepresentative of the people there, which has now begun to erode the kind of great progressive social gains that you've seen in that country. In neighbouring Argentina, the right came to power as well. In the Philippines, the murderous Rodrigo Duterte swept to power, whose so-called war on drugs means mass murder. He's admitted to killing people himself.
I must admit that a third of the killings really happened during police encounters. And I know it because I'm not trying to pull my own chair. But in Davao, I used to do it personally.
In Poland and Hungary, right-wing authoritarian governments have continued to erode democratic rights and freedoms and increasingly move towards semi-dictatorships. Here in Britain, a poisonous campaign, a referendum campaign supposedly on the European Union, which had the flaunting of bigotry and xenophobia and racism, which was injected into the very centre of political life. Well, not only was that referendum campaign poisonous enough, but it was on those terms that Britain voted to leave. Hate crimes escalated, and Britain has been left more divided, more polarised, more bitter than at any time since the end of the war.
I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
And while David Cameron was toppled, the Conservative Party lurched further to the right, whilst at the same time the Labour Party collapsed into disastrous infighting at the very time that we needed an opposition. And then, of course, the most 2016 thing that could possibly have happened.
You'll be so proud of your president. You'll be so proud.
Donald Trump was elected president of the United States. And all the time, this tidal wave of right-wing populism continues to sweep across the Western world, with the National Front in France And in the Netherlands, Geert Wilders, and in other European countries, right-wing populist parties and movements feeling triumphalist, feeling as though they're on the ascendancy. Pretty bleak. But, you know what? We have had worse times than all this. You know, we can just sit around moaning. But if you take that long view of history, the illusion of every time in which you live is the way things are now or the way things will always be. And in the 1930s, things seemed a lot bleaker than they did today. Fascism was liquidating democracy all over Europe, where we ended up in the 1940s with totalitarianism, of genocide, of the slaughter of tens of millions of people. It looked for a while at times as though there was very little hope for humanity at all. But things changed, and they changed dramatically. And actually, after the most horrendous moment in human history, we did in the aftermath have governments like in Britain, which came to power and created things like the National Health Service, the welfare state, and created more socially just and equal societies. Yeah, a lot of that's now in reverse, no question. But the people now who are on the rise, once upon a time, they felt really weak. They felt they'd lost, they'd been marginalised. But things changed in their advantage. And as things have changed dramatically in their advantage, they will change in our favour too as well. We just have to be ready and prepared. It means not being complacent. It means addressing our weaknesses. But in no way does the future of our planet belong to the Donald Trumps, the Nigel Farages, the Marine Le Pens. It just doesn't. And I think history will look back at those people, at those demagogues, at people who exploited the most basest of fears and prejudices, who turned neighbour against neighbour rather than attempting to build just societies that actually dealt with people's underlying problems. History will damn them. And I think history will look kindly on those of us who had courage and determination and resilience and stood our ground and refused to be defeated. They're not going to win. And the issue is not whether they'll lose, they will eventually, but when. And that's a question we all have to answer. So if this video, the first bit, made you feel a bit miserable and despondent, the point I'd say is that the film hasn't come to an end. This is still got a long way to go. It's only 2016, and I think in the coming years, we'll look back at this period, and think, that was bleak. But I think we'll look back and go, well, look, we managed to pull ourselves out of it. But that means all of you watching having optimism and resilience and doing things. Join a political party within reason. Go out and knock on doors. Go and reach people who aren't convinced. Join a single issue group. Join a trade union and organise people in your workplace. Bring a friend. Every single one of you brings a friend just to, go out knocking on doors or do something in the community, volunteer at a food bank, any of those things. You'll make a huge difference. And you will, I think all of us in the coming years, I think we'll have kids and grandkids who'll ask us at this time of huge crisis all over the world, what did you do? And I think all of us have to have a pretty good answer to that question. So don't mourn, organise. Don't look at this as though this is all inevitable and there's nothing you can do about it. We're going to turn this around, but it means gritting our teeth, having a bit of hope, and standing up to these people and winning over the people who need hope, not fear.